LJN, the Rainbow of Doom. Most people despise the company and their supposedly crappy games, but I actually enjoy them, and that's why I now don the moniker of the LJN Defender! After a longer than anticipated hiatus, the LJN Defender has finally returned to bring justice to the rainbow. It's closing in on a year since the previous proper episode, and I feel that I have to do something special to make up for its absence. I've received a lot of requests to stick up for specific trash titles from the Louis J. Norman Company, but there's only one that sends a shiver down my spine at the mere mention of its name. I've put off this review since the beginning of the series, but the day has finally come to face my greatest fear: Bill and Ted's Excellent Video Game Adventure. The notorious NES tie-in to one of the most popular 80s franchises was released in August 1991 to coincide with the launch of the highly anticipated Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. It was developed by the rookie studio Rocket Science Games and features a story that serves as a pseudo-sequel to the original film. In it, Bill and Ted go on a solo tour through time to retrieve kidnapped historical figures and quickly return them to their rightful era before the Wild Stallions' career-defining concert. As the cutscene wraps up, we're brought to the phone directory that functions as their base of operations, where the imperiled historical figures are displayed alongside their respective numbers. Our mission is to find the flashing red text and then press select to access the keypad in order to dial the listing that locks the coordinates for the bodacious duo's trip into the circuits of time. The blinking digits correspond with an interconnected sequence of pipes that the wannabe TARDIS has to traverse to complete the call. This process can be completed without lifting a single finger, but 2 cents from Rufus's limited stash will be deducted as a penalty after each circular orbis cross, so it's important to manually bypass the transmission and take a shortcut to the exit. Pressing A at any point will blast the unconventional craft in the direction of its rotation, but be careful to avoid the skulls, as coming into contact with these ominous icons will also devour the coins. Upon clearing the path, the screen will transition to the isometric overworld, where we're instructed to track down the missing historical figures, but how we're supposed to accomplish that is very vague. The manual states that there are certain items that have to be collected, which will draw Rembrandt, Cleopatra, and their peers towards the time machine, but this bait is hidden far from plain sight. The citizens encountered along the trail provide some helpful tips in seeking this buried treasure, but more often than not, I ended up just jumping into every rock, tree, and gate in the hopes of discovering anything useful. You might think I'm exaggerating the complexity of this task, but that is the exact course of action the manual suggests to take. Needless to say, this is mind-numbingly tedious, and I would have drifted into a deep, drooling sleep if it wasn't for the rabid lunatics that charge our heroes with the adrenaline-pumping intensity of the Ultimate Warrior in his prime! These steroid-fueled madmen can be eliminated by pressing B to utilize the boomboxes, highly explosive textbooks, and other good stuff found in the pause menu, but the consequence for being broadsided by these cheap bastards is a one-way ticket to the slammer. Luckily for the titular teens, the skeleton keys at the top half of the inventory are all that's required to escape the cells, but it's still best to always be on the defensive to avoid a premature end. The crazed jailer dudes are just one of the many stumbling blocks that ensure the road ahead is a long and stressful one, but the burden is eased by the horses and canoes that hasten our progress and the peaceful civilians that pass along essential survival tools from our faithful compadre. In addition to the Samaritans on the streets, there are a variety of fascinating characters inside the buildings whom we engage in expanded, in-depth conversations. The outcome of these discussions depends on the choices we make, with good choices leading to the location of the historical figures, and bad choices, well... Anyway, these dialogue trees are actually fun to experiment with, and I definitely have to give Rocket Science props for implementing something so clever in a trivial project like this. If you manage to discover the historical figure and the correct bait, Bill or Ted will travel back to the present and rock out with their bandmate in the dimly lit and empty auditorium. Remaining true to the source material, the Wild Stallions really suck at first, and the accompanying chiptune is warped to ear-grinding imperfection to reflect this, but the musicians gradually sharpen their skills with each successful mission. With their concert wrapped up, the boys are greeted by Rufus and told to go back in time to fix the destructive efforts of the rebel scum. The ensuing stages up the ante by obscuring sections of the circuitry with quarter-munching skulls and require the dueling guitarist to rescue multiple iconic figures before their next gig, but the general formula sticks to the lather, rinse, repeat approach. Just keep walking and jumping over and over again. I spent hours combing over these huge landscapes, often coming up empty-handed, so I inevitably caved and decided to consult a guide. Unfortunately, the text and video assistance that I saw out of sheer desperation only got me so far. It turns out that every variable within Bill and Ted's excellent video game adventure is completely randomized. This meant that the guide I chose to follow was basically worthless to me, since the locations of the items in my playthrough were radically different than those of the long play. I frequently had to return to the phone booth and re-enter the password in an attempt to reset the necessary elements, but this was a huge pain in the ass and not worth the aggravation and annoyance, so I resorted to the only sane solution and threw in the towel at the midway point. Bill and Ted's excellent video game adventure is many things, but one thing it most certainly isn't is excellent. I thought that I'd experienced the worst that LJN had to offer with Back to the Future 2 and 3, but this soul-sucking Dementor in a plastic cartridge makes that look like a masterpiece in comparison. I mentioned that I appreciated the dialogue exchanges, and I genuinely meant it, but that is the closest this gets to capturing the vibe of the Bill and Ted that I loved growing up, and I would strongly suggest staying away from this disastrous disappointment of an 8-bit adaptation. Anyway, now that I've finally delivered this long-awaited episode, I've got a mighty Cygnus review in the works for next week. Be sure to come back for that, but until then, this is Matt, the LJN Defender, signing out. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more, the boxes on the screen right now will lead to some more of my videos, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel by clicking on my avatar in the bottom right hand corner. Thanks again.